Okay. Okay, welcome to today's show.
Yes,
Week 3.
yes, and we are live now.
Yeah, we're doing it live today. If you have any comments, please don't be hesitant to ask us. We're gonna do a live session. Me and John, we're gonna start talking about the like astral, Buddhi, spiritual, anything like in general.
Yeah, general topic. We're going to talk about it. So, if you have any questions or you want to join the chat or whatever,
Yes, please.
just type in your comments and we'll try to answer as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not specialists, but we
have interest in
we have
spiritual
interest.
topics. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, let's have a conversation. Yeah.
Yes, we are happy to do that.
Yeah.
So please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please, let's start. Okay.
So John, like this week, let's talk about like body, soul, and
Mind.
mind. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're talking about the general idea of like the soul concept, or
Yeah.
like, the spirit concept, I think most, civilization or culture did have some sort of idea about spirits,
Yeah.
or like even soul and that kind of thing. But you can say in general, like,
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Belief is, I think, is a wrong word for this because I feel it's the most logical
So
kind
too.
of like
Yeah.
the route for your own kind of like consciousness to
Yeah.
travel through, I think. Because
Last week we spoke about the swastika. It's about like the symbol of reincarnation and sunshine. So these things from like in ancient time, like people knew it, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think we've discussed this before, but like I think a lot of ancient cultures and ancient civilization were aware of this, the spiritual dimension of our lives, and they actively try to incorporate that principle into their own daily lives. So everything from giving offerings to the natural world, like a living offering outside to appease certain spirits, local deities or spirits that inhabit it, was an attempt by ancient cultures to work in harmony with the environment and everything. So yeah, there is definitely more awareness of that kind of like side in our ancient kind of like ancestors. And well, it depends on where you live as well. Like in Western culture, we've lost.
Yeah, I just wonder, like in the Western culture, like I don't know if it's people believe in this reincarnation. Of course, there's some of them, but in religion, is there any like a particular one? Because in Asia, you find like in everywhere. Japan, I mean, I guess in Hindu, in India as well. Like this thing is like for them, it's like common sense kind of thing, right? But in the Western world, like in Christianity, it's like I guess like you go when you die, like you have like judgment, like you go in front of God, and after that is any like they have like a next life. Is any like kind of thing like this?
I mean, so basically, I think I've heard somewhere like every civilization follows certain kind of like developmental pattern. So I heard like we'll start off as like animistic kind of like society, then polytheistic, then they go to monotheism. There's like if you put it in a general overall term, like there's like 3 stages within the development, like each kind of nation or civilization according to their own kind of time scales and everything. So like animistic belief, I think some of you might be aware, is a belief that all things have some sort of like spirit residing in them. So, you know, things like rocks, trees, grass, you know, rivers, all being inhabited by certain spirits and whatnot. What people used to do was, you know, try to placate those kind of like spirits that reside in those kind of natural kind of like objects and like, you know, living things. So what they would do is like they would go to like a lake or a pond, and they would give an offering or some sort of an offering to the spirit of the lake. Or I mean, the most, you know, when people say that, one that comes to my mind is like, you know the King Arthur's,
Yeah.
you know, the Holy Grail, the myth of Holy Grail and everything. Well, basically, there is that scene in which King Arthur casts and throws away his Excalibur into the lake, right? As it sinks down, you know, the Lady of a Lake comes and grabs the Excalibur. She submerges it and comes up in the lake and everything. And people say, well, this is just like a story and myth and everything. But like, this kind of practice was done in ancient time, especially if you're talking about Europe, like, you know, the Celtic people. There's an evidence that they gave offerings to those kind of bodies of river or like lakes, to placate those kind of deities or spirit that resides into it.
Fairy.
Yeah, or even some kind of like a mer creature, like, you know, they say mermaid and everything.
Oh yeah.
And when people think about mermaid, they think, oh, something to do with ocean and but there's actually a lot of folklore relating to mermaid. There's actually like they inhabit like inland water as well, meaning like they reside in the inland lake as well, not just in sea. So there is like a kind of like kind of folklore relating to that. And what they used to do is like, whenever they needed something or like, you know, and whatnot, they would give certain offerings to the bodies of water, in order to communicate with those spirits and whatnot. You get it? And one thing, the ancient Celts believed that the water, body of river or water, was a passageway to the other side, to the other world as well. So they believed that if you go
kind of like a portal.
Yeah, so it's like
a dimension. Or?
Yeah, they see it as like a portal to the other world. And if you're talking about the Welsh mythology, which is like the Celtic people, so they believe that the bodies of water is like a portal to their own other world called Anwinen.
Anwinen.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of like even like these archaeologists, like, you know, researchers, when they go underneath the lake or like some riverbeds, they always find some kind of like jewelry or like swords and everything, and they believe that this is like a ancient custom of like these Celtic people, and they gave offering to the to the river, the deity of the river, or like the water and everything. So that's just one example, but there's like numerous examples of people doing that. So yeah, the other most common way people gave offering was to trees as well, because this kind of like idea that the trees inhabit spirit is very ancient as well. Didn't just happen in Europe, but it happens in Asia and like in different parts of the world as well. You know, even if you're talking about Japan as well, they have their thing called Goshinboku, right?
Yeah.
So they believe that certain gods or spirits reside in certain, like, you know, ancient trees and whatnot. We have an example here, you know, all around us in Japan here. And so, you know, Well, in Japan, what they usually do is they build like some kind of shrine next to it,
Yeah.
or some kind of like a stone monument, or like to actually mark that area as being holy, and they put like some kind of chains around it,
Yeah.
like rope to
Yeah,
signify
ropes.
that it's
Actually,
a,
that's made from a
Yeah.
hemp. Actually,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So those ropes are made from hemp, and hemp is considered to be like a sacred kind of plant in Japan. Until quite recently. After World War II, it became a different story. So
Yeah, wow.
yeah, that's another.
like next time we can like discuss about this topic. Yeah,
Yeah.
why this hemp has been banned. I mean, it used to be in Japan like over 80 years ago. It used to be a culture, but now it's banned. After that, American bombed Japan, they changed everything. But this like we can discuss about next time. Like
Yeah. So I mean, but it would make sense why people have held like animistic kind of concept and belief in those ancient times, because when we're talking about 1,000 years ago, more 2,000 years ago, people didn't have the convenience or luxury that we have now. They needed to survive on their land. I mean, most people were farmers to an extent, unless you live in some kind of like capital, like city. Maybe you can do some business, like trade other people. But if you go to especially rural area, I mean, you have nothing but land and the nature, So they needed to survive. So what they always do is like, I mean, farming is one of the most basic kind of survival skills, survival procedures that people employed in order to, just to get by each and every day. So I think there was no day in their lives where they didn't go outside. So they always had an interaction with nature. But as you do, if you are always out about in nature, maybe there are some things that people realize that maybe they're not just the only things that's conscious or alive. Do you get it? And we know on a basic surface level that plants and even rocks are alive to a certain degree. Do you get it? But we don't think of them as being like some kind of animals or human kind of thing. But this is not how ancient people viewed it. They viewed it as like a non-human person, meaning like they may not resemble like us, but they possess certain conscious qualities or even certain emotions as well.
So you say that plants has like emotion?
Yeah, that's what they believe. And so even especially like, and they have this belief that some like especially trees, if they are like and like ancient trees and whatnot, they seem to be inhabited more by a powerful spirit or even some kind of deity as well. So there was a taboo relating to like cutting down those kind of trees to get it. They were protected fiercely. And there are many like tales and folklore related to how some of these people who didn't believe in these things, or like they thought, okay, just cut them down and everything. After they do cut them down, something really bad happens to them and like and whatnot. It's being recorded and whatnot. And the interesting thing is like, even now, this belief is strong in some places.
Such as like where?
Ireland. They have very strong belief in fairies in Ireland. And when people think, fairies are this kind of like mystical, twinkling like little creatures and whatnot, but that's like a Victorian romanticism that they depicted as being like cute, like mischievous, like little creatures and whatnot. But if you look into this and fairy lore and everything, actually fairies and those kind of elemental spirits were very much feared back in those days, because they knew that there is a kind of like idea that especially for Celtic people, they have this. Well, Irish people, they have this ideas like being fairy led. So if you go to like certain area in which they believe that like some fairy activity is really present and everything, if you don't give any offerings and you went into this forest and everything, you'll be fairy led, meaning like you can't come out of that area, a district. You go to like one route, right? You come back, you try to go out of that route and everything. No matter how many times you try to go out, you keep coming back to the same place. Yeah. So there are like different ways to actually counter that as well. And some people say, if you take your pocket inside out and everything, that counteracts that kind of like the fairy tricks as well. Or if you wear your shirt upside down, you get it like inside out, then you can actually come out of that tricky situation, basically.
Oh yeah, it sounds like really similar. In Japan, there is if you wear that t-shirts upside down in a reverse way, the fox comes out kind of thing. You know the fox, like in Japan, it's like fox is like kind of powerful animal. It's like it's sent by God or something. Like it's
There's many tales about the fox spirits in Japan as well. It's kind of similar to like fairies in one sense. That they were like considered to be like a spirit animal, like nature spirit in one sense together. But they had that kind of like trickster element to it, meaning that they always like trick people and play mischievous things on people. That's why you see lots of folk tales and tales even in Japan about foxes, right?
Yeah.
It's like so common throughout Japan and
True,
everything.
yes, yeah.
So that's like an equivalent of fairies in Ireland and like some parts of Britain as well. So, there's like famous poem called Stolen Child by Seamus Heaney, who is like the national poet of Ireland and everything. He basically describes about, I think he composed that poem based on like a folklore he read somewhere. So basically it's about like a mother who loses her child through fairies, basically. So it kind of like narrates how one day the mother's child were playing outside in the field near the mound or something, then that child disappears.
It really sounds like yes, it sounds like in Japan there's a kamikaze.
Exactly. Can you see all these like similarities? And everything. It's amazing how these kind of like similar things are happening in different, or similar tales that kind of connects to different parts of the world. And it kind of narrates everything like that, and it kind of shows that there was always that kind of like tales that has been even told even to this day. You get it? So you get you even get storytellers even now in Ireland talking about the dangers of fairies and everything. It's usually like an old man who knows about lore of fairy tales and fairy myths and everything, and they warn other people, the community, not to disturb a certain hills or location because that's where the fairies reside and everything. Actually, even till even quite recently, how there's a thing called Fairy Fort in Ireland, in where they believe that there's like a mound or like certain structure within landscape that is believed to be inhabited by fairies and everything. And it's been told from ancient times that you shouldn't actually disturb these hills or you get in big trouble to get in. So even now in Ireland, when they try to create some kind of like a road or motorway near the fairy fort in hill and everything, they actually deliberately go,
Like,
you know, curve out.
Yeah.
No, they won't go right through the fairy hill, you know, because they have this strong belief that exactly that you're gonna get in trouble if you actually disturb their sites and everything. So, yeah.
Like, especially like what kind of place is that? Is like, you know, the where is the place exactly location? Like, have you ever heard of it?
Apparently, the fairy fort, there's about 40,000 fairy forts in Ireland alone.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
It's like everywhere. There is like probably the local people. They have at least one or two around them. That's how common those fairy hills are. Do you get it?
Okay. Wow.
It just looks like some ordinary, hill that you may see in other places. But
is there any signs up there like don't like a disturb or like don't like a pass here or like because
I mean, local people know.
Yeah.
That there is that kind of like legend attached to those hills, so they will not even go near it sometimes. Do you get it? So it's kind of interesting now how this kind of element is quite strong in Ireland as well. I mean, Ireland is predominantly Catholic and everything, but they still kept on this like kind of like pre-Christian belief about nature spirits like fairies and everything. So it's a really big part of their identity as well. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? I presume why they could have kept that kind of fairy faith, as they call it, is because they adopted that form of Christianity called Catholicism. And Catholicism, if you look at it, compared to the other side of Protestantism, and Catholicism are kind of relaxed about people's in general kind of folk faith and and everything. So they didn't mind people as long as they went to church each Sunday, pay their taxes and worship their saints to a degree. They didn't mind what people were doing. It was their private time. So even if they had festivals and everything. So because people say a lot of Christians accuse Catholicism of actually practicing polytheism. Do you know why?
No. What is
because this whole concept of saint worship.
Okay.
Yeah. But they believe that we all some of us knew that Christianity is a monotheistic religion because there's only one God, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't worship anything else. But so that's why you see Protestants and Orthodox. I'm not sure about Orthodox, but especially Protestants, Christians always accuse Catholicism to be pagan kind of religion.
Yeah.
Because their belief in the saints and everything is contradicts their whole idea about the monotheistic concept and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's why those kind of belief lasted much more in Ireland and everything. But if you look at places in different parts of the UK and everything, because we have form of Protestantism and we have Anglican kind of churches and everything. Anglican is kind of weird because it's in between Protestants and Catholicism.
Yeah.
Because they have their own saints as well. They do venerate saints in Anglican churches as well. So they have one foot in Catholicism and other foot on the Protestant church. I mean, Anglican church was created for political kind of agenda and everything. Do you actually know why Anglican church was created?
No.
He created because in the times of Henry VIII, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Britain was Catholic.
Yeah.
But because we all know about Henry VIII, he had 6 wives and everything. In Catholicism, once you're married, you cannot divorce your wife.
Yeah.
So in order to like be able to like, because I think his first wife was Catherine of Aragon, so she was like a princess, like a Spanish royalty and everything. Spain's staunchly Catholic.
Yeah.
And especially her, she was like very Catholic and everything. And but like in Henry VIII, as he is, he wanted to get divorced by Catherine of Aragon. I mean, they were married for like 20 years and everything, but if you're under the papal rule and order and everything, you cannot get remarried unless you're widowed, or you cannot make children with your wife or whatever. You need to have like very specific reason not to, because he didn't have that reason. So he thought, okay, he actually he actually asked the Rome Pope if he can actually get divorced by Catherine, and they rejected it completely and said no, it's not against the biblical law and everything. So he got frustrated, so he decided to actually create his own branch of Christian church called Anglicanism. So in that kind of like an Anglican church, you can get divorced and remarried and everything, and well, you did have that kind of like elements of Catholicism. They do still venerate saints and everything. So it was kind of like a church set up to legitimize his kind of divine authority in the church. That's why you give praise to the royal family in the Anglican Church, because they believe that in the Anglican Church wise, it's like the royal family has been appointed by the God basically to rule over Britain and all the empire and everything. So it was convenient for him to actually create his own thing. So is that kind of like split thing, and and then you had that kind of Reformation went on, certain different kind of like Protestant idea came through in Britain as well. That's why you see like Oliver Cromwell just went out and started a civil war and and basically burned people at stake for even reading the Bible, the translated Bible and everything. It's crazy at that time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly when this whole witch hunt thing started.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I mean, exactly. Witch hunting is a very famous kind of phenomenon in Europe, right?
Yes, in UK, actually, especially I forgot the place. It was in Canterbury. I went. Like there is a bridge. Then the lady has to stand on the bridge, and if it's like your reflections is not on the river, then that means that you're a witch and they got killed or so far.
So they had all sorts of manner to actually check if you're a witch and everything. So they did I think one of the methods was like pricking different parts with a needle on your body, and one other method was you put a weight on those accused witches and you throw them into the river, and if they don't sink, if they float, it means they're witches, because usually people do sink, right? So they did this whole I think in my opinion nonsensical kind
but
of
I guess there's a most of the reasons more it's about bitching, right? It's just maybe there's somebody who don't like saying, you know what, she's a witch.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it's
yeah, exactly, just going in that thing, because this whole witch hunt thing has become it's such a common place. So inevitably there will be people who start accusing other people they don't like us being a witch, so they'll make a false claim that, you know, my cow got sick, or like, you know, and my husband became impotent because she cast a spell, do you get it, and everything, accused it. I don't see that woman attending church every Sunday, so she must be on the Sabbath, you know, dancing with the devil or the hill or something like that. They accused him of that and that kind of thing. But don't get me wrong, I believe there is an evidence that some people did practice some form of like folk magic and healing in different ways, and it's far more complex than someone accusing someone of being, or you know, like a witch or some kind of like folk healer or anything, because there are like different occupation even within that kind of like people magical kind of tradition and everything as well. I mean, the most common word for people using some form of like magic or sorcery or magic was called witch, because they believed that they had a pact with the devil, like, you know, and they gained their magical power for devil worship and everything. And yeah, and you get other people, so-called white witches, or like folk healers, or cunning man, cunning woman. Or
does that mean like is the opposite side of like black magic is like more about healing or something?
Yeah,
it sounds
exactly.
like it. White is like something like more light power.
Yeah, exactly. So witches had always kind of like that kind of bad connotation between them. They believed that witches only use their power to gain, you know, to curse others or hex and kill people through the diabolical means and everything. But if you're talking about like, you know, wise man, wise woman, or like white witches, or like, you know, and cunning man and cunning woman, they're like basically like folk healers.
Yeah.
So they use certain herbs and remedies to cure people from certain ailments and everything. So there's actually a lot of records of like what people used to do. So they
like such as what?
Yeah. So they have like you know, a lot of these things are recorded by people who accused them of practicing dark sorcery or like, you know, magic, or like, you know, and accuse them of being witches and everything. But they do have like certain remedies for certain ailments and everything. But they usually these informations like kind of like, you know, gained through their own confessions and everything. So yes, I do practice certain, you know, folk healing and everything, and you know, and they go on to like tell the judge when they're in the court and everything about how they go about healing and everything. That's why there's actually records of like, you know, so-called witch trials in when these kind of like so-called folk healers gave detail about the whole recipe and ingredient and what they were doing to actually counteract. And they just say, okay, this is what I was doing. There's nothing evil, maleficent about this, to get it. And I have no ties with this whole thing. And that's there are like people who did come to testify for those accused and saying, you know, don't condemn her because she killed my son through her, you know, folk healing methods and everything. So, if you're talking about, so that was like more of like, you know, for, you know, wise woman or, you know, thingy. And you have this called cunning man. Cunning man. Meaning, it's like a man who's wise in those kind of like, you know, magical herbal arts and everything.
Yeah.
So they were kind of like people who can perform certain kind of like magic to counteract witchcraft, basically. So if people are suspected of being like bewitched by certain witches and everything, cunning man or cunning woman newer method to actually counteract those kind of like
like how
a spell that was cast on certain people.
Yeah.
So I think one method was like, you know, I can't remember exact details about the methods, but like I heard something like it's actually like interesting. They use like some kind of bottle, and they would like put certain like, you know, materials like certain herbs and even some hairs and like, you know, and they fill it with their own urine and everything, and they actually boil that and everything, and when they boil it and everything, according to the folklore or the tales, basically those accused of bewitching that person will come knocking on the door of that person who could believe to be bewitched, and it's like, you know, please stop that because, you know, you're hurting me, you're agonizing me. It's like, you know, so they'll come and know that, you know, they're being accused and so on. So there is that kind of like counter witchcraft kind of thing, counter magic too.
Yes.
I mean, so they provided that kind of service to those accused of like, no, not accused, by like, you know, someone who is believed to be hexed or like, you know, cursed basically by those accused of being used to witchcraft and everything. So there's cunning men and wise man and wise woman. You had those service to provide these communities to counteract.
Does that mean that is a job or just like do they take? Money?
Some people were making money from that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's not only thing that they did, like, you know, divination, like, you know, fortune telling to like, you know, tell the future and the past, and like, you know.
That's my image of like these people. Like they wearing a robe or something like.
Yeah, some of them. And they were considered to like educated to a degree. They did have access to certain grimoires or like magic books.
Grimoire. Okay.
Yeah. So these are like the, you know, like spells and incantation that some people have, like, you know, collected, and they write. It's basically like a recipe book for certain folk magic or like, you know, folk healing method and everything. And there are actually like, it's actually a weird line because there are actually even tales in these kind of cunning men actually tricking the devil to actually gain those kind of like so-called the black books or the grimoire, because they believe that, you know, the traditional tales or folklore relating to like those kind of witches and what they do. There's a very traditional kind of like a way in which so-called relaying how they actually made a pact with the devil is like, you know, I mean, most people at those times, especially if you're in Europe, right, they're baptized when they're born and everything.
Yeah.
There's a famous case in Scotland. There's a accused witch called Isabel Gowdy. She's like really famous case in the court. She's actually she gives a very elaborate account of how she actually made a pact with the devil and like the whole process and everything. It's like, it's so detailed and like so colorful that people are thinking this is not just made up. Maybe there is something going on here, because this woman called Isabel Gowdy, she was just like a peasant woman. Yeah. And people are thinking, how did she get all this information? How? Because most people in those days, 1600s or 1500, they were uneducated. Especially if you're living in rural areas or like you're a peasant.
Can you imagine if you live in the countryside?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess the information. No, sorry.
No. I was just saying, like, so basically, if people are interested in like, you know, witchcraft confessions, check Isabel Gowdy. I mean, no, seriously, like this is like really detailed account of what she went through and everything. And one of the kind of accounts which kind of like is being repeated in elsewhere, like people confessing to witchcraft and everything. They tell that during certain times of the year, a certain moon phase and everything, they actually go into like a church.
Yeah.
They circumambulate the church 3 times, right? Around the church 3 times, and on the 3rd time, they're actually they basically they chant certain kind of verbal kind of incantations over the lock, and they breathe into the lock, and when they do that, the lock opens.
Yeah.
And when they enter it, when they enter the church through that, they, according to them, they'll see a black man standing at the pulpit with a black book on his hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, they'll go up to the pulpit, and they claim that to be the devil. So basically, and they say, they tell you that if you want to be, if you want to make basically, and long run is if you want to make a pact with me, you have to renounce your baptism, basically. So, what the so-called
how do you do that? I don't get it. What does it mean, like reverse baptism? Like you put in baptism, you go inside the water, right? You but what is that reverse version of that? Like how you do it? That.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give brief information about this whole thing. So if you're talking about Christianity in general, there is a process called baptismal rite, in which if you dedicate yourself to the Christian faith and everything, you'll go through this rite called the rite of baptism, in which I mean this is.
I don't know. I'm not a Christian, so I don't know really much. You dive inside the water or something like this. Yeah. Is that the one you're talking about? Okay.
So in the Bible, this is actually kind of related in the Bible, in which even Jesus himself actually were baptized in the River Jordan.
Okay.
By John so you have this figure called John the Baptist, who actually initiated this whole baptism, the rites and everything. So what do is basically you submerge yourself. Well, the person who, usually a priest, who will baptize you, will submerge you into the water, right? Into the water, and you come back up, and he pours the water over you and says, now you're blessed, you're reborn, basically. So it's a form of part purification ritual, part kind of like an initiation ritual, and need to signify that you now belong to the Christian faith, basically, because so it's related in the Bible that if you're going to commit yourself into the Christian faith, you need to go through the baptismal kind of ritual and everything. So it's like a form of rite in which you go into that Christian faith and everything. So because they had this belief in this, especially in Europe, that if you don't get baptized, your soul will not go to heaven. So, as the European country.
Does that mean like you're doing the Protestant, the Catholic, the both of it? Is every Christianity they do this baptism?
Yeah, to an extent. I think some sects of Christianity don't do this anymore, but I think most, even Protestants, to a degree, they do this kind of baptismal rite as well. So it's just like a covenant or initiation that you go through in order to be a Christian, to get it formally. And especially in those times.
Have you done it? You did?
Oh no. I mean, I'm not a Christian. So,
okay. All right.
But I have studied about it, and I have been to churches, and I have some information about this regarding this process and everything. And so basically, they believe that if you do go through the rites, you have basically committed yourself to Christ and His teaching and the Christian faith and everything. And they believe that on top of it, they believe that if you actually, so what they say is like especially when Christianity was quite strong in Europe in those ancient times and everything, they still had this strong belief that if you don't get baptized, your soul will not go to heaven. You know? So they made sure, the general population made sure that the newborn child will get baptized when they're born. You know?
Do they charge money for this?
I don't think so. I think it was a communal thing. So like, you know, it was like a protocol that everyone went through those days. Just like anything really. Like, you know, maybe they have faith, maybe they don't. But I think generally speaking, people back in those days had like quite a strong faith in God anyways. So, you know, they needed to do that, and then because they believed that if they're unborn, you know, they believed that the unborn child, if they die within the womb and everything, then of course you can't get it baptized and everything. They believe that they actually go to some kind of limbo or hell because they don't get baptized in the womb and everything. So they made sure not to get. You know.
So you say like this is the dead like a baby's like souls like in a limbo and
In limbo, exactly. So
not hell, it's just limbo.
in limbo between hell and heaven, basically.
Okay, that is I think is worse than hell, no?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, so they didn't want that for their own child to happen. So they made sure if their child is born, they'll get their, you know, child to be baptized and everything. So I think most people back in those days in Europe got baptized one way or another. You get it. And those who didn't get baptized because, you know, they had certain circumstances, they did eventually get baptized later on anyway. So I think you can say with her, Isabel Gaudi's, all the accused so-called witches were all baptized at one point in their life. Do you get it? So what they do is they're basically going back to this whole thing. It's basically when they enter the church, there's a black man standing on a pulpit, and he has a black book on his hand and everything.
What is that black book? It's like dark side of a holy Bible or something.
What does it see? So basically, so what they say is like, you know, some called initiated witch or guide this kind of like, you know, aspirant witch to actually renounce your baptism from head to toe. Do you get it? And they're saying, you know, and they'll have to repeat something like, I renounce my baptism from the head to toe and all besides my head and toe and everything. And this so-called the black man will like make a mark on you. Yeah. Usually like a prick or like certain marks and everything. Like what? And he sucks the blood out of your mark. Yeah. And he spits on his palm. He sprinkles that blood onto that initiating witch and said, I now baptize you, whatever name, Janet or whatever, in the name of the devil. Now you're part of our covenant and everything. So through making that pact, you receive the black book from the devil. Yeah. And through that black book, you can use a magic. That's the folklore behind it. Okay. You get it? So there's that kind of belief. Relating to that, Isabel Gaudi goes into great details about how the procedure and everything. Because this is weird, because she gives a confession just like a crazy woman, maybe making things up and everything. Actually, this kind of process of like gaining certain kind of initiation with the devil is repeated elsewhere in different parts of the world. Like in different parts of Europe, they get it. So people are accused of witches, and they have no connection with this woman, they get it. But they relay very similar kind of procedure as how she was describing. You get it. They go through around the church 3 times in certain time, and they go into the thing, and you know they do that procedure and everything. The devil, I renounce my baptism from head to toe, and like, you know, the devil initiated me and everything. And so there's a common pattern happening elsewhere. So maybe there is something to it, but I don't know. But people say maybe there's like some kind of like shamanic initiation or whatever. But going back to that, what was I saying? So basically, that. So what was I going through? So she got initiated, and so they have that kind of belief that certain witches have that kind of thing. Oh yes, going back to it. So the whole concept of cunning man or cunning woman or wise woman and everything. They went through certain kind of like they did certain rituals to actually invoke the so-called the devil. The devil had, they do have different precision how to do this and to invoke anything. There's like a one famous called there was like a Scottish kind of like legend about this one wise man who actually did certain rituals to invoke the devil, and when they invoked it, he drew a circle to actually protect himself and invoked it. He did certain things to actually trick the devil to give him the black book to him. But he never had to initiate or renounce his baptism, and they believe that you can outwit devil sometimes to actually gain something.
Trick the devil. Wow,
yeah, trick the devil. That's interesting. And there's a full whole. I think it was kind of the red book of like. Yeah, I need to recheck this. But so some cunning man actually claimed to have tricked the devil to receive certain magical books from them. And they use that to their own knowledge and counteract witchcraft and everything. So
it could be this Isabel. She got the book from a devil. She tricked it.
We don't know exactly if she did have a black book and everything, but there is an account on her doing certain rituals to turning herself into like a rabbit or like certain birds or something like that. She even gives a certain incantation you can actually chant to actually turn into certain animals to go to the Sabbath, or we fly into the air and everything. This is like her confession is like so detailed about this whole procedure and everything. Scholars are having still a big debate about what actually happened, what was actually going on that kind of confessions and everything. And I do have like a book analyzing this whole confession, which is because it's really interesting how they went to it. So I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I'm still reading it. But it's kind of interesting though. So I'm saying like in those times, like people did have this belief that if you interact with certain spirits or some kind of deity figures, you can gain certain powers and everything. So there are people who counteract that, fortune telling, divination. Those are very common thing back in those days together, and they call it the popular magic, popish magic. So basically, like it was kind of like certain techniques that people used to practice. Those back in those days together. This can be observed everywhere around the world and everything. So what I'm saying is like, so those kind of idea or profession is usually like, it comes out of that belief in that everything has certain spirits, and you can actually negotiate and interact with them to a degree. You can actually even make a so-called pact with them, or like you can be in a working relationship with certain spirits to get it. This is not unique to like Europe. This happens in Asia as well. If you're talking about Japan, you have this thing called kitsunemochi or inumochi,
Yeah.
They call it, skimono, which is like a,
Skimono, yeah.
or like a possession.
Possessed,
of,
yeah, by
exactly.
animals.
I heard like, this is only a few days ago. I checked this, like
Yeah.
this whole called concept of inugami.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's like I was actually quite shocked on how they do it. They delete that in order to create this called inugami or dog deity,
Yeah.
in which you can actually work with and everything, is you get a dog, right? Then you bury that dog until till their neck and everything. You actually leave that dog for a while, and eventually, of
How
course,
long?
how long till the point of they're starving, right? Basically.
Okay.
So when they're starving,
Yeah.
this person was trying to create that thing. They'll give a food. They'll place a food in front of that dog, and the dog's trying to basically bite onto it or try to eat it. On that moment, you actually cut the head off the dog.
Okay.
And that moment, you cut the dog's head, right? And what they do is like you basically burn the head. You get the skull out of the head, and you put that as a spirit house of that.
I guess that's like a more negative, like it's
Yeah.
like a more.
When I heard
because-
that, I was like, what the fuck? Seriously, people did
It
this?
sounds like one of the rituals. It's called a kodoku. You put like a bunch of insect inside of one pot. You just make them like one is on the survival, and they use this like one insect and like curse somebody.
Yeah.
It sounds like they use this kind of animal's negative energy into like.
Exactly. But that's just like the one I heard for the Inumochi or like Inugami and everything. So basically they create that called dog deity or Inugami, right? And they put that to their altar, and they actually worship or interact with that, dog spirit that inhabits that. So that dog deity or spirit will possess that person or the sorcerer or like the witch, better word, like witch or whatever. And when they possess you, they give you certain powers over, what do you say, like, they can actually, like, on the command of that person being possessed, this Inugami can actually possess another person to make them go crazy.
Becomes an animal like it.
Yes. It's this kind of like form of like a dog sorcery, kind of like people back in those days. It was quite, so it's that kind of like, it's that kind of like a initiation people did to gain certain favor. I mean, there are many different ways people did to actually gain favor from different spirits or deities and everything. I'll just give you one or two examples. There are other examples in which I heard somewhere like, there's a concept called familiar spirit, So it's like, people say, well, it's like an animal spirit you can pet and everything. So the so-called, the sorcerers or like, witches or like, even cunning men, they have a thing called familiar spirit. Familiar spirit is like a form of like, you can, for lack of better word, like an animal spirit. You can actually make a contract with, basically. So I heard certain rituals in which you contact certain kind of like animal, kind of familiar spirit to come to you and everything. I heard something like, this is my one method. There's actually numerous methods to actually how to do this. It's like you get certain animal bones, right? You paint it red, and you actually circumlate that animal bone, certain number of times, and you actually call in certain spirits you want to attract and everything. And eventually, then or after those kind of animal spirits will come to you,
Yeah.
or a familiar spirit will come to you and say, I want to make a pact with you, or like we can work together and everything. And they call them magicians or sorcerers.
Yeah.
They will make a pact with it. They give you certain kind of like requirements, and they'll make certain agreements and they'll work together. So what they do is like, so what the sorcerer or like the magicians usually do is like, if they want to perform certain magic or cast a spell and everything, they'll seek the aid of a familiar spirit.
Yeah.
So, so if they want to do certain love spells or like money spells and everything, they will ask the familiar spirit to help them with their magic and everything. So what they do is if they want to make someone fall in love and everything,
Yeah.
certain thingy, usually the magicians will create a certain rituals to perform that and everything. They'll ask the familiar spirit to actually go to those two couples to actually enact those kind of ritualistic kind of like effect on them and everything. So you see sometimes like there's a very common kind of motif about how witches with a pointed head always has a cat next to it, right?
Yeah.
They say actually that's actually familiar spirit that they made a pact with. So it can come in forms of like cats, dogs. The most common form is like cats, dogs, or frogs,
Frogs.
or rabbits, or
Okay.
or mice, or like mouse.
Yeah.
You get it? And they usually keep it in some kind of box to actually feed on.
Yeah.
Feed those familiar. There's actually like a pic. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but there's actually like a picture. Some like a wood block pictures.
You should use this.
From there. So this, can you see?
Yeah, sure.
So.
Give me a second. Yes, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, so if you can see that picture there. So
Yes.
basically, this is like a depiction that people have. It's called a magician witch. The familiar is being depicted as like
It's a long nosed ladies and witch, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can see that in the box there are like several like toads or frogs, right?
Yeah.
In there, she's feeding the familiar spirit near there.
I'll show you this one. So this is a picture, right?
Yeah. So this is, as you can see in this picture, you can see an old woman. I think it's an old woman.
Yeah.
Feeding.
Looks like a witch kind of face. It's a big nose, like evil nose.
And you can see that.
It looks like one's a lizard.
Yeah, exactly. Not only there are frogs, but it's like a lizard. Yes, you can have a lizard familiar as well. So this whole concept of like familiar spirit is very common to those who were accused of using some kind of sorcery or like magic and everything. But it could be used for benevolent kind of like form of like magic as well, like So there are times where people, like even Cunningham, is said to have like dealing with familiar spirit and everything. If you put it in a very general kind of term, It's like, I don't want to compare it to like this kind of culture, but like if you're talking about like Native Americans,
Yeah.
they have this concept of spirit animals. And,
Yeah.
they they have they aid in their own kind of like kind of shamanic practices and everything. So it's kind of similar to that, but it's quite distinct and different at the
Yeah.
same time together, because how they go about doing things and gaining things. So I'm not expert in like Native American kind of like
No.
spirits and everything, but like so they employ that kind of thing. And I heard even like the so-called witches who made a pact with the devil. The devil actually provide them with familiar spirit as well.
Yeah.
They give you a familiar spirit. So yeah, so for you to. And going back to this whole fairy thing, guess what? Interesting thing is like some witches or sorcerers or magicians, even rumored to have like fairy familiars.
Yeah.
So they believe that you can actually make fairies into familiars as well. You can work with.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's how do you go? Alchemist kind of is going to that way. No, it's like alchemism, like Rinkinjutsu. No.
I mean, sorcerers and alchemy has always had like a connection as well.
Yeah.
But this whole concept of like,
Think.
do you know like this? If you're talking about, let's go to the popular media, right? Alright? If you know, let's say, I mean most people know Legend of Zelda, right?
Yeah.
And Zelda. What does Link have besides it?
Oh yeah, it's a fairy. He's actually keeping this the fairy in a bottle.
Yeah, exactly. This whole concept of
Yeah.
like, fairy, you can see it's guiding
Yeah.
the hero Link to like his, the destiny and everything.
Yeah.
It's like a fun. So in the same kind of very superficial vein, that's the concept of familiar,
Okay.
if you understand it. Like
sounds like also in the Berserk, the
Exactly.
Japanese manga. It's
I was
the
go-
pack.
I was going there. Basically, like in Berserk, you have this, Puck, with like a
Yeah.
fairy who always sticks
Yeah, it
by
was
you.
guiding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's,
So you can say that's guts familiar, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, probably unintentional familiar,
Yeah.
guiding him and everything. So even if you're talking about Berserk, even that that girl who practiced, who was like considered to be a witch.
Yeah, Shirke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the witch.
She had a familiar as well, which is like a fairy as well.
Yes, she has I think the character name called Ibarera or something
Yeah,
like this. Yes, she has a fairy as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, they're elf. Right?
Yeah. There's a connection there, and I'm like saying, I mean, if you're talking about Berserk, when I read through it, and
I want to pick up that topic next time. Berserk.
yeah, exactly. All I can say is like that Berserk author has done his homework basically.
Yeah.
He really studies about folklore and myth and everything. There's actually a lot of things I remember. I haven't read Berserk in recent years, but like
John, I want to do that next week. I think this time has come, so we're gonna finish this
believe
session
me,
today.
that guy, the author, has really studied myths and
Miura
folklore of
Kentaro.
Europe to
He
actually.
just passed away a month ago. It was May.
Exactly,
I guess it was
exactly.
in May. Yes,
And
it was sad.
All I can say is, Miura, you're a genius. To get like
Yeah.
you have done your research and you're very spot on. about
Oh,
everything.
Antonio,
Seriously.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we can pick up the
Yeah.
topic next
Yeah.
Berserk next week.
There's actually like an astral projection connection I can make with his work as well. Or
Yeah.
Berserk as well.
Okay.
It's like-
それいいね。
Is I don't know how this guy knew all this kind of thing, but
Yeah.
he did his research. You get it? So going back to this whole topic, so basically, all we can say is like, people who use magic, not all people, but who accused to have practiced sorcery and magic and everything, they did have this concept of like gaining familiar spirit, then with a magical act or spell casting and everything. As you can see, in even in Japan, you have kitsune mochi, inu mochi, in which they used basically fox familiar and dog familiars to aid them in their sorcerer's practices. So this is not unique to European kind of like culture or everything. This happens everywhere. Like even in Siberia, you have the concept of like spirit animal in that sense. I'm not
like more wolf, isn't this?
Yeah, totem. They have that kind of say wolf totem.
Yeah.
Like, totemic animals that people use to aid their shamanic practices and everything. And if you're talking about shamanism, you go to like northern Scandinavia, you have like the Sami people. You can say the most common familiar in Sami people, I presume, was like reindeer.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, a reindeer. To get it, reindeer is a most quintessential kind of animal husbandry, and like in the practice of it comes out. It's related to a lot of their folklore, and they have this bear cult as well.
Yeah.
In Arctic mysticism as well, bear cult is very common as well.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about in Japan as well, you have the Ainu people who actually worship bear as like the messenger of gods, basically.
Yeah.
So even I heard somewhere, I haven't confirmed this, but I even heard like in the Ainu people in Hokkaido, some parts still they put like the skull of the of the bear in an ancestral altar as well, in order to worship and honor the basic bear spirit and everything. So maybe you could say maybe they've used the power of like bears
Sounds like it.
in their own shamanic practices to get it. So this concept has always existed in like different cultures and everything. And people say Europe doesn't have a culture, or like the white people. I mean, there are many evidences like people have used certain kind of like shamanic, like cultic kind of practices and everything. So this whole concept of animism has always existed, and existed even in 1500 or 1600 back in the UK or like in Britain. You get it? So it's everywhere basically. It's just like people don't become too conscious of it, because as time goes by, people's idea or concept behind spirituality or societal values change. You get it? So those memory or those practices or techniques or lore are actually forgotten. But if you dig a bit deeper, you can actually unearth lore of these kind of like things people used to do back in those days. So
Jonah, I think it's the time is like we reached the time. So today's we finished this session. So we're doing this every week. We doing a live session every Sunday. If you have any like question or comments, don't be hesitant to like put a comment on. We're not specialists, but we're like interested. We love to talk. We love to talk with a fan as well. So yes, please subscribe and like wait for the we're doing it every Sunday. So please check it out.
So
see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.